Hello, good morning. I am Francesca Natali and I will be with you for the next 30 minutes to present and to explain you how to finance bioenergy companies using European Structural and Investment Fund. I will explain that making practical examples from my direct experience in order to provide you with technical advice in how to use European money available for funding those type of companies. Before entering into the details on how to use ESIF fund to set up financial instrument, I would like to say that there are also additional more financial sources that should be checked if you are looking for financing bioenergy schemes, project or companies. There is of course Horizon 2020, which is the European Research and Innovation Program, providing funding to bring new innovative technologies and ideas into the market. Then you should check, as you may know, the European Green Deal and also Horizon Europe 21-27 could be an interesting source of funding to support sustainable energy projects. I would like also to mention among the others programs that are available at European level, the Innofin schemes, which is managed by the European Investment Bank, because it's a scheme providing loans, guarantees and equity type of investment for innovative energy demonstration project. Last but not least, for final beneficiary, there is also the new equity investment fund called European Bioeconomy Fund, which is a very new initiative supported again by the European Investment Bank and the European Commission, providing funding for European scale-up from the bioeconomy sector. So there are a number of opportunities that are available at the European level to finance bio-based and bioenergy-based project and initiative. But you should be aware about the fact that over half of the European funding is channeled to each country through the 5 European Structural and Investment Fund, the so-called ESIF fund. The 5 funds are jointly managed by the European Commission and the European countries. The purpose of all these funds is to invest in job creation and sustainable and healthy European economy and environment. ESIF funds have in general 2 main goals: to support the growth and the economic development of the European Union and the creation of jobs. Those 2 main goals are common for all 3 types of region: less developed, transition and more developed regions. ESIF target also at supporting territorial cooperation, which is the main aim of the European Regional Development Fund. The 5 funds have mainly focused, as I will show you later on 5 areas: research and innovation, digital technology, supporting the low carbon economy, which is a topic that is very relevant for the bioenergy sector. They target at supporting a sustainable management of natural resources, another focus area that could be interesting for the bioenergy sector, and small businesses. The 5 ESIF fund have different target and different goals. They can be delivered to final beneficiary directly in the form of grants or through financial instrument. And when they are delivered through financial instrument, they take form of loan, guarantees, equity and quasi-equity investment, which are the 4 main financial products that can be delivered by the European Structural and Investment Fund. The main difference between grants and financial instruments, meaning again loan, equity, guarantees and equity, is linked to the fact that the grants do not need to be repaid. On the other hand, financial instruments must be repaid in a different ways, but they need to be repaid by the final beneficiaries. Loans should be repaid in the form of capital plus interest. Guarantees is paid by the final beneficiary through the interest that he or she needs to pay for the guarantees delivered, and the equity needs or should be repaid through the selling of shares or quotas. So please keep in mind which is the main difference between revolving and not revolving schemes. Not revolving schemes are those schemes that are not paid back, meaning grants. Revolving schemes are those schemes which have the main advantage that could be repaid back by the final beneficiary, creating a revolving mechanism. It means that the money that is coming back to the financial instrument may be used again and again for more and more investment. So the money that is allocated into each of the 5 ESIF funds can be used by the managing authorities to set up a financial instrument. ESIF programs, in fact, are approved by the European Commission but are implemented by member states. Is therefore a decision of the managing authorities in each member state which type of financial instrument to set up according to the results and objective to be achieved. The financial instrument that can be used by the managing authorities again are loan, guarantees, equity and quasi-equity schemes. and the decision to use one or more of those financial instruments is linked to a sort of feasibility study that should be done in advance by the region. The feasibility study I have just mentioned, it is the ex-ante assessment that the managing authorities need to deliver before launching any financial instrument. The ex-ante assessment is a process aiming at assessing the financial gap existing at regional level, should define what is needed, why is needed, and by whom. So the study, the process to deliver the ex-ante assessment should be done according to a set of rules, which are the Common Provision Regulation. The Common Provision Regulation are the rules that should be taken into account not only before the ESIF financial instrument will be launched, but also in the design and in the management of the financial instrument. So the ex-ante assessment is a process made of 7 steps, aiming at the end at identifying the investment strategy of the selected financial tool. It means that according to the results of the financial gap existing within the region, through the ex-ante will be defined target beneficiary, type of money required, and type of financial instrument that need to be implemented. For example, a region may have a number of high technology companies that cannot access to bank lending because those type of companies have not collaterals to show and to put as a guarantees. So as a result, the ex-ante assessment should define the most suitable financial product capable to fit the financial need of those high growth technological companies. According to the results of the ex-ante assessment, managing authority have all the required information to select the most appropriate, the most suitable financial product to be delivered to the final recipients, meaning loan, guarantees, or equity schemes, or maybe a mix of those products. But when it comes the point to choose and design the structure of those financial products, managing authorities may decide to allocate the money into a new or an already existing financial instrument designed according to the specific need of local final beneficiary. In that case, managing authorities will go for a so-called tailor-made instrument, specifically designed for fitting the needs of local final beneficiary. As a second option, managing authorities may go for the so-called off-the-shelf instruments, the already prepared schemes ready to be launched and delivered to final beneficiary. As a third option, managing authorities may decide to allocate the money into compartments of instruments managed at central level. I would like to say a few additional words about the off-the-shelf financial instrument. I already said that are available for equity, for loans, for guarantees. They are opportunities for managing authority to deliver in a faster and in a safer way financial instrument to final beneficiary, because they integrate the knowledge, the expertise acquired during the previous programming period. So there are 5 off-the-shelf financial instruments integrating different type of financial product, loan, guarantees, and also equity schemes. I will go into more detail with specific reference to the co-investment facility, because we as a MetaVenture, we have been managing a number of those co-investment funds. So I would like a very short recap about the main ideas, the main concept discussed so far. I would like to stress that there is money available at European level, and a good percentage of that money is allocated into European structural and investment fund. That money will go to countries and regions that have assessed the financial needs of final beneficiary in order to develop a suitable investment strategy, defining the best financial product to be delivered to the final recipient, who are persons or companies. The money should be spent in order to support growth plan of the final beneficiary, because if the money is spent in such a way, the money can be repaid back by the final recipient, can come back to the financial instrument in order to be spent again and again. Here a couple of examples of bioenergy initiative financed by the European Investment and Structural Fund. You may find on the slide the references for having more information. Before entering into more technical and practical example of existing financial instrument, I would like in brief to stress once again which is the main difference between equity money on one hand and debt money on the other hand, in order, to have clear in mind which are the two main forms of financial instrument, and to have a clear view, a clear understanding of what their main target. So we have equity on one end and debt on the others, because we may assume that also guarantees it is a sort of debt, being an underwriting of a third part debt. To understand what their main target in terms of job creation and in terms of type of companies, we should understand that equity is a long-term investment, because it's money that is provided into the social capital of the company, supporting a growth and expansion plan of the company. It is a money that, if the company is successful, can create a good number of jobs, having a great impact on the regional economic development On the other hand, if we refer to debts, we may say that debt is more a financial instrument to support organic and stable growth of existing company. It is a money that should be used for supporting working capital and running cost of the company, meaning that if the company is successful, at the end will maintain or just increase a little bit the existing number of jobs. Equity, again, is a type of money that, because should be used to support an expansion plan of a company, should be used for a selected number of companies. And those type of company may require a good amount of money, an higher amount of money if you compare to companies that may need debt money. So, if you wish to develop equity financial instrument, you should be aware that is a type of money that should be invested for a few number of selected company to support long-term project, high risk, but potentially high return. On the other hand, debt financial instruments are tools capable to support existing company, more traditional, more mature, that need to receive money to finance working capital and running costs. So at the end, you should have, being a managing authority, you should have a clear understanding of what type of final beneficiary you want to support according to the type of regional innovation strategy that your region is keen to implement. Having clear in mind which are the main differences between debt and equity capital, and saying that equity financial products are the product capable to fit, to better fit the needs of new, innovative, knowledge-intensive companies, I would like, to explain why also those type of companies are needed, and why it is mandatory to use also public money to support the creation and the growth of those type of companies. I would like then to jump into few examples coming from my experience as a venture capital investors. As a final part of my speech, I would like to provide you with a few conclusions and take away. So we have just said that financial instrument providing equity to companies should target at certain type of companies, meaning innovative, or as we call it, knowledge intensive companies. Why those companies should be financially supported? Why those companies are so important? The reason is quite simple, because if those companies are successful, they may create a great number of new jobs. There is a report, a study from the Kaufman Foundation stating that new companies, the top 100% of new companies create 10% of all new jobs. And if we count also indirect jobs, the percentage go up to 40%. New companies, of course, create 100% of new jobs. So they are an incredible tool to support the creation of new jobs, and it should be a reason for managing authorities, for regional stakeholders, to include the creation of new companies as a key objective of any regional or national policy strategy. As we may see also from the slides, also in Europe, new companies are a great contributor to the creation of new jobs, especially in crisis time. So if we go back to the question, why do we need innovative companies and why do we need to support from a financial point of view the creation and the growth of those companies, we may say that new entrepreneurship is one key driver for the regional economic development. So it should be mandatory for each regional or national innovation strategy to develop also financial tools capable to fit the needs of those special type of companies. So if we look into the bioenergy sector, it's quite clear because we need to provide to those type of companies the right type of financial support, which is also equity money, because there is a strong push in our economy towards a greener solution coming from technology exploitation and valorization. And if we want to be competitive as Europe, we need to invest into innovation, into intangible, and we need to support bioenergy project and companies, even if I mean, they are risky businesses. So we have just said that new companies, knowledge-intensive companies, are a powerful tool to support the creation of new jobs and to foster the economic development of a region or of a country. They need also money to start and to grow, but they are not capable to access to debt finance. That's why they need to access to other type of funding, such as equity. In order to deliver to those type of final beneficiary the right type of financial instrument, you may refer to ESIF co-investment facilities as a good option to set up and to launch a equity financial instrument. So I would like to provide you with more details about one of the already mentioned off-the-shelf schemes, which is the equity co-investment model. The equity co-investment model is a scheme that can be used by managing authority to set up an equity co-investment fund providing financial resources to new innovative companies. Equity co-investment schemes are tools attracting private co-investors at company level. It is a smart way to attract more private money into very risky business, because private investors such as venture capital rather than business angels prefer to invest their own money directly into the company together with the fund rather than putting their own money into the fund itself. What is important to know that in the co-investment schemes available through the off-the-shelf facilities, there are different leverage that can be activated between public and private money according to the stage of the company. But according to each region, different ESIF instrument should be designed and implemented in order to fit the specific need of regional final beneficiary. So we may say that one size does not fit all. It means that different type of financial instrument should be designed and launched according to the regional differences. And now, I would like to provide you with a couple of examples coming from our experience in the management of regional venture capital funds co-financed by ESIF money. We have been working on regional level in Italy, in Poland, and in Slovenia through the Ingenium funds. The Ingenium funds are co-investment funds which have been designed according to the regional needs. And because regions are different and final regional beneficiary may require different type of money and financial support, those Ingenium funds have been providing different type of money to different type of final beneficiary. I would like to compare the two Italian funds we have been managing so far. Ingenium Sardinia on one end and Ingenium Emilia Romagna. In Sardinia, the Ingenium Fund was in charge to support traditional and more mature company, because the regional entrepreneurial ecosystem is composed mainly by those type of companies. On the other hand, the two Ingenium fund that Mecha Venture has been managed in Emilia Romagna were targeting a different type of beneficiary, because the region wanted to support the exploitation of existing innovative results available within the university, within the innovative companies existing around the region. Both the two equity co-investment funds set up in Emilia-Romagna were targeting at new innovative companies, preferably from the ICT and the biotech sector. More than 25 million euros have been invested, if we count the two funds, into innovative startup existing within the region. The main goal of the region through those two funds was to show the innovative capabilities of the regions and to support the creation of new knowledge-intensive company. There was a clear need of equity gap affecting those type of companies. That's why the managing authorities decide to set up two equity co-investment fund. The management company of the fund was in charge not only to provide the money raised by the European Commission through the RDF fund and raised by a private investor, but the management company was also in charge to support the company grow and to support final beneficiary through mentoring and business services. If we go to the Ingenium Sardinia, we may see that also different type of money was provided to final beneficiary because the regional ecosystem of Regione Sardegna is really different from the Emilia-Romagna one, and so the size also of the fund was quite larger, and larger investment were done by the fund in order to mainly support not new innovative company, but mainly to support already existing company and to support the expansion and the internationalization plans of those type of companies. Just to jump into the final part of my speech, I would like to leave you with a few final suggestions and recommendations coming from the experience gained in the management of the Ingenium Fund. So I would like to conclude saying that if your innovation strategy is keen to support the creation of new companies or the exploitation of research results, equity and quasi-equity financial tools are the most appropriate type of finance to be provided to final beneficiaries. If you are keen to set up such type of equity type fund, I would recommend to go for co-investment schemes rather than typical funds, because co-investment options are much more appealing for private investors that need to be attracted. I would also suggest to select a private management company in order to ensure a commercially driven investment strategy to the financial instrument. I would like to provide you also with few suggestions with specific reference to the size of the fund, which should be consistent with the investment focus of the fund, and should be, of course, checked according to the results of your ex-ante assessment. By the way, I would suggest you, if you are setting up a seed fund, to allocate not less than 15–20 million euros. If you are going for an early stage fund, I would suggest you to allocate around 40–50 million euros in order to have enough money to support your best company, your most promising company, through additional round of investment. I would like also to suggest you to go for an agnostic type of fund unless there is a proven demand coming from a specific sector, like ICT rather than biotech or medtech. but it's something again that should be proved according to the results of your assessment study. As a very final suggestion from my side, I really invite managing authorities in take advantages of the advisory and training services offered by the European Commission and also by the FE Compass, because those type of services offer training and support for better understanding how to implement also from a technical point of view all those different type of financial instrument, and provide also technical assistance in tender specification and agreements to be signed with the selected management company. Here you may see some few documents that could be quite useful for understanding the legal framework under which financial instrument may be set up. Unfortunately, those documents are referring to the current programming period, so I invite you to check for amendment and for modification of those documents. I would like to thank you for your attention, and I am here at your disposal for Q&A if you may have.
Okay, good morning everyone. My name is Alberto Rocamora. I'm a policy officer at Bioenergy Europe. Well, I would like also to start obviously thanking Tirce and all the organizers of this webinar series for inviting my organization and myself to speak about the European Green Deal perspective for the bioenergy sector. A little introduction of what we do at Bioenergy Europe. We are the Bioenergy Association at European level, so we represent the whole supply chain with different actors around, from manufacturers to bioenergy providers. So in our structure we also have both big European players and national associations, so that allows us to have an overview of the needs of the sector and represent it here in Brussels. Well, you can see here a bit of our membership, but yeah, if you want to check more out of what we do, you can always visit our website and you have all the information about our members and the benefits of membership. Going down to the topic, let's start on the basics of bioenergy. So for everybody to understand this departing point. The departing point is that bioenergy, it's, well, to start, let's start with the greenhouse gas emission reduction in the EU. We can see, although if you see the history, there has been a decrease in carbon intensity, and therefore in the greenhouse gas emission coming from energy generation. Still, almost 80% of the greenhouse gas emission in Europe in 2017 come from energy uses. So you can see on the top of the chart, fuel combustion, energy industry and transport being the leaders. Agriculture, industry and waste coming after. You can see also down some important forums and articles that have been pointing out at the need for really a change in our model of energy production, and in particular in regard with the fossil fuels. If we look at the history of energy generation, and I will detail what we understand for energy generation later, but we can see in Europe, in the European Union, a steady decline on solid fossil fuels. This is mostly coal, while biomass and other renewables have been increasing their contribution to the point that biomass is currently the main source of renewable energy in Europe. Then you can see oil has have also a downward tendency. Even natural gas that has remained more steady in the last years, while other non-renewables contribution is still minor in comparison with the big picture. So in general, not only in absolute terms, bioenergy contribution has been increasing, but also when you see it as a share of the energy. I already mentioned that it's the main source of renewable energy and accounts for almost 60% of renewable energy generation. Of course, with differences between sectors, but we will go to that later. You can compare in the right graph bioenergy with other renewable sources, and on the left you can see, as I was mentioning, the share of the pie. This is on the total of energy consumption. So you can see that even when you put together also the non-renewable actors, bioenergy share is significant and has been increasing. Also, maybe to say in relation with the previous one, has been increasing while the energy consumption have been decreasing at the EU thanks to energy efficiency and economic cycle. Coming to the sectors that I have been mentioned, so sometimes when we talk about energy, people can misunderstand and hear only electricity. But electricity is only one part of the picture, and indeed heating and cooling represents around half of the energy needs in Europe. Then we have electricity and transport, as I showed in one of the first slides, also has a remarkable contribution to greenhouse gas emissions in Europe. When we divide it by sector, you can see that bioenergy is predominant in heating and cooling. It provides 14% of the overall energy consumption. In electricity is remarkable as well, 6% of overall electricity. And this is important also because sometimes even heating generation comes together with electricity through combined heating and power plants that allows to increase the level of efficiency by using the residual heat from the process to other uses that might be nearby through a heat network, or maybe within the same industrial use or any other possible heat need that may be around. While in transport, bioenergy, mainly biofuels and also biogas for transport, still represents also the majority of the fuels. It's true, and maybe we can discuss that later. The model is changing, and the Commission is foreseeing a change in the type of fuels, but I still recognize that electrification maybe is not a technically feasible solution for all the ways and means of transport from here to 2050. Okay, so heating, as we mentioned, bioenergy is the main source of renewable within heating and cooling. Going only to heating or bioheat, that's the heating from bioenergy. We can see that around half of it, is devoted to residential uses. Around 1/4 of it is also used for industry. It's very important because when we talk about the renewability of industry, and this is probably a bigger discussion that we cannot have in this presentation, but there are some concepts like carbon leakage and competitiveness of the European industry that when you address this, you may look at renewable energy sources that can provide high temperatures for those sectors that are more electro-intensive right now, such as I can think about cement or steel, and also how you integrate residues, for example, in the paper or wood industry as a source of energy. For that purpose, bioenergy is very well suited and indeed is very well integrated in those bio-based industries such as I mentioned wood and paper, but it can be extended also to any of the source, any other use that may have some byproducts or residues. Also, I would like to mention agriculture is something that now is getting more and more traction. Other uses can be commercial and derived heat. Derived heat is the word that we use for district heating, as I was mentioning. This is kind of network where the heat is moved from sources, which can be a CHP or in general any source of heat. In particular, now there's more and more district heating using residual heat from other uses, and then move to residential uses, public buildings, and so on. On the electricity side, I put already before the comparison between bioenergy and other sources, but here you can see it more in detail. It's less predominant than heating and cooling because, as I mentioned before, half of the for example, of the bioheat goes to residential, and those are usually small installations that don't have the possibility to produce in such an industrial or relevant scale for considering a combined heat and power plant. But yeah, also maybe interesting to see that the sector is committed to increase the efficiency, and indeed most of bioelectricity in Europe is produced from a CHP, so that increase efficiency and reduce heat losses. On the transport, yes, this is very relevant because it's something that in Bioenergy Europe we are not extensively covering, but you can see the use of compliant biofuels with the RED II criteria has been also increasing at the same time that in general renewable electricity. Very important on this, I was mentioning maybe the idea of electrification is gaining traction, maybe more for the individual uses, but all the other possibilities, especially heavy duty, maritime, and aviation, that needs to be addressed and considered. Coming back to the greenhouse gas emission contribution, you can see, consistent with this approach, the majority of the savings produced by bioenergy comes from bioheat, with also remarkable bioelectricity, and less with biofuels. And in general, I think the Commission is aiming also to increase the contribution of this sector into the decarbonization by addressing in a wider discussion the use of land and so on, and maybe we can come back to this a bit later. Very important also in relation with the greenhouse gas emission. In 2021, the RED II, when I say RED II, I mean the Renewable Energy Directive as recast in 2018. Its sustainability criteria will come into force in 2021. This set up the foundations for energy generation to be considered as renewable for the targets that the EU and member states had until 2020 and the EU has until 2030. Then eligible to public support as a renewable source, and be considered zero for the UETS. So UETS is the emission trade system in the EU. For those who doesn't know, it covers mostly industry and energy generation, and it's a market mechanism for giving a price to the emission that then can be traded. Once that the source of energy is considered renewable, it's exempted because it doesn't have any carbon contribution to the UETS, and indeed bioenergy is carbon neutral from the point of view of the combustion, and therefore when it meets the sustainability criteria, when it comes into 4, it will be rated as 0 and eligible to public subsidies, just as is happening until now, with the addition that it sets some limitations to sourcing, in particular the alignment with the sustainability requirements for high value land, high biodiversity consideration, primary areas, LULUCF requirement also. This is member states are required to increase the capacity of absorption of the sinks in comparison with a forest reference level that is calculated thanks to the LULUCF regulation system. And then emission savings. So there's a minimum requirement for emissions that have to be abated if you compare with the non-renewable source that bioenergy is substituting. And for this, you count also all the process, so transportation and so on. So in this way, even if the combustion is rated 0, you are incentivizing operators to reduce emissions throughout the chain and also to produce in a more circular way. Some exemptions are biomass coming from residues. The reason behind that is it's obvious. The EU wants to incentivize the use of residues, and it's understood that it has a overall positive environmental impact. And the small installations, which are mostly for domestic or small size purpose, are also excluded because technically it won't be feasible for them to fit all the administrative requirements to be part of the sustainability criteria. On the economic contribution of the bioenergy, let's go a bit first on the indigenousness of the source. Most of bioenergy, I will go to everything. Most of bioenergy equipment is produced in Europe. 74% of the suppliers of the supply chain in Europe are based here. This is more than 5,000 businesses. You can see also on the graph in the middle on the map that Europe is central to the world pellet trade flows, so both in production and consumption, and also in R&D, in research and development. We can see the national funding is relevant, and the number of patents. So it's a very active industry that is committed in general with always achieving the maximum levels of efficiency, as I mentioned before, and also to decrease emissions. And for this, for example, that's been also a big incentive from the EU on the eco design, which is a general framework for all the appliances to be more environmentally friendly. So this is from the production, but mostly on the emission. So at this point, the small appliances, which I said they are not part, for example, of the sustainability criteria, they are bound by the eco design. So the level of pollutants that can emit is very, very, very limited, and this is the case for all the appliances, not just for bioenergy. It's something that I would like to make a point here. Yeah, on the indigenousness, now coming back to this, but only 5%, less than 5% of the biomass consumed in Europe is imported. And this is even before the incentives that I mentioned for the sustainability criteria, which also very important to say, it's applied regardless of the origin of the biomass. So any biomass flow coming to Europe, it will, within the scope of the RED II, will have to be subject to sustainability evaluation. So yeah, in general, it's a source that economically works better in circular and proximity supply chains. You can see in comparison on the left in comparison with other solid fuels, and on the right you can see our estimation for the availability of biomass for 2050, where you can see I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation the potential of agricultural biomass. Also organic waste, mostly for biogas, and yeah, other categories, forest biomass, which is nowadays the main source of biomass. Yeah, that's it. You can have the minimum estimation for 2050 and the maximum, and then in between. It's I found it interesting to see how our estimation, and we will also see the Commission forecast for those years, the exponential growth of agricultural biomass. And for pellets, one thing I forgot to tell is bioenergy is also involved in certification. In the case of pellets, through the EM Plus system. You can also find more information in our website and in the EM Plus website. On the cost competitiveness, it's an important discussion that is getting more and more visible, which is linked with the energy poverty. You can see on the graph on the right the Eurostat statistic for energy poverty, that is people that is not able to afford to pay the utility bills. This is a big problem in the EU, and since the State of the Energy Union, the European Commission and other EU actors have been trying to engage on this. And now with the renovation wave, that's something that I will touch upon at the end of the presentation. It's also recognized, but now the question is how can we address that? On the left, for example, you can see the comparison of the price of bioenergy, which is in yellow and red, together with other traded sources of energy, electricity, gas, and so on. I would like to point two things. First, obviously, the lower cost in comparison with the other ones, but also the stability in the price, which also allows for users to be much more aware of their consumption and plan the future consumption. This fact, also the cost competitiveness, has been recognized in a Commission report for heating and cooling, where bioenergy has been considered as the only cost competitive at this moment for technology for heating and cooling. Maybe case study of Lithuania is important because they have been changing their heating district from gas to pellets, and they have gained energy independence because now it's locally sourced, but also they have provide heating by a lower price. I put Kaunas city, but in general it's a trend that happening in Lithuania. And yes, on the job contribution, half of the jobs in the renewable energy industry are in the bioenergy, which is consistent with the contribution as well. On the European Green Deal now, these were the commitments made by the President Ursula von der Leyen during her confirmation. as a president of the European Commission, 50% greenhouse gas emission, at least carbon neutrality by 2050, and a border tax, a review in the Energy Taxation Directive, and on the EU ETS. What came after that was the European Green Deal. So besides the overall Commission commitment and the President personal commitment, there's also a Vice President in charge of the European Green Deal, Frans Timmermans. The Green Deal was presented last year. Here you can see the structure. So it's a very overarching agenda comprising most of the policies within energy, environment, and actually most of the legislative agenda, I would say, together with other 5 priorities that the Commission identified. The whole exercise to move to carbon neutrality started in 2018 when the European Commission presented his climate strategy with some scenarios at different level of ambition before the climate neutrality was made law. So you can see for bioenergy on the left, on the feedstock, the role of waste and agricultural residues is increased. This in line with what I explained that are our forecast. And on the right, you can see the use of bioenergy by sectors, which increase the role of power as a balancing of the system, and also with the idea of combining, I believe, with the CCS, carbon capture and sequestration. Then the climate law was the legislation the Commission put forward to recognize the carbon neutrality and to decide on the pattern on how to get there. Basically, the most discussed issue was how legally the Commission can enforce this, and it was the Commission proposal was through a system where basically there's a delegated act where the Commission can reinforce the targets provided by the member states, which wasn't particularly welcome by member states because delegated acts provide much more power to the European Commission than the current target setting, which is mostly relying on member states' will through the national energy and climate plans. And set the important milestone of 2030, where we already have targets in place, but those will be reviewed. Those actually are on the way of being reviewed. So if we were in 40% and Ursula von der Leyen in her confirmation said at least 50%, now the European Commission proposed 55%, which seems very feasible politically if you see the position of Council and Parliament, which according also with the climate plan, with the climate target plan and the impact assessment, will lead to an increase in RES, in renewable energy, of around 38–40% in comparison with current 32%, and same for energy efficiency. Yes, you can, yes. The new targets, well, I already mentioned them, and the comment on what they will entail according with the impact assessment, which indeed provides very good information and is also based on the national energy and climate plans. So the departing figures that the Commission is using are very accurate in relation with what member states, and they already provide enough level of ambition to overachieve in renewable energy. So this shouldn't be a problem, but now the discussion on the targets it seems a bit more heated, while some member states are not very happy. Okay, here you can see the forecasts by the national energy and climate plans. I'm gonna try to be fast because I see I'm running out of time. I showed before 2030, now 2050, now they include 2030. You can see steel waste increase, lignocellulosic grass for 2050 relevant. And the LULUCF, well, together with the new level of ambition in renewable, which will open a review of the RED 2. Now the Commission is also opening a review of the LULUCF that I mentioned before, and how we can increase the ambition. So it's either in strengthening the current system or increasing flexibility with the ESR, which the effort sharing regulation, which include the emissions that are not counted in the EU ETS, greenhouse gas emission, or create a single target for all the forestry, land use sector a follow. Yeah, so I was mentioning the effort sharing regulation, which is mostly the human-induced emissions, which are not counted in EU ETS, which mostly covers energy generation and industry. Here, the approach of the Commission for the review of effort sharing. So nowadays member states have individual targets because those policies are mostly under the realm, and they have some sort of flexibility, mainly banking and borrowing. The options for the Commission is that the Commission is putting forward is either while you extend EU ETS, which is already in the agenda. Should you reduce effort sharing scope at the same time? Should you maintain it as a sort of net in case that the effort sharing price volatility doesn't provide enough incentive? Or should you just remove effort sharing altogether and cover all the emissions by other instruments, mostly effort sharing, EU ETS, sorry. Another important aspect, as I said, is agricultural biomass. So in Bioenergy Europe, we are keeping an eye also on the Common Agricultural Policy, which is currently in the latest stage of discussion by the co-legislators, which introduced some innovative approach to the Common Agricultural Policy in comparison with the previous one, mostly the role of member states. Yes, mostly the role of member states. But what is important for bioenergy, in the slides before I passed it because of time, but probably you can see it. It's the mention in the strategic plans to. So basically, the mention in the objectives, or that should be included in the strategic plans of relevant chapters that can be used for providing support for bioenergy and bioeconomy. In particular, we are looking at the formulation of the eco schemes, the carbon income support, and the rural development, which in the previous Common Agricultural Policy was supporting pretty much energy generation in rural areas in a big proportion. Other policies worth to mention, farm to fork, which is in general also for agriculture. It's a communication is related with the CAP, but it's mostly on reducing pesticides. An important dimension of the biorefineries. The biodiversity strategy, which also mentions bioenergy as a win-win solution, and emphasize the role of waste within bioenergy, and the sector integration, which tries to make the energy system more resilient, like connecting all the energy uses, transport, heating and cooling, and electricity, and to provide more flexibility between networks. And last, the contribution to the economic recovery. Okay, so basically the idea here is how technologies can contribute to the economic restart, reconstruction and recovery after the COVID. You can see here the employment intensity of biomass, which is also consistent with the graph that I showed at the beginning of the contribution of bioenergy in the overall employment of the renewable energy sector. Renovation Wave is one of the flagship programs because the Commission understood that can have a very positive impact in employment, which aims to increase the rate of renovation in buildings. Very important for us because it includes also dimension of increasing renewability in the buildings. So hopefully also increasing the renewability of heating and cooling, which was one of our main advocacy lines, because we were not happy with the 1.3 percentage point in the current RED II. So these member states had to increase their renewability of heating and cooling by 1.3. We think we can move much forward, especially if we want to achieve carbon neutrality. And this has been recognized somehow in the renovation wave. And probably this is something that will be considered in the review of the RED II. And to finish, the sustainable finance. This is an initiative that the Commission has to increase the resources for the transition, this time from private sources. So the Commission is setting the criteria. First, through general text on the sustainability criteria, sustainable finance, and then on the delegated act, which is called taxonomy, which has technical screening, which is the point that we are now. I could go into more detail, but maybe I don't have so much time. So I will finish by thanking you and giving my email address. Any question that you may have, maybe you want to address me by email address. And thanks for your attention.
Good morning. This is a webinar in which I'm going to present policies for bioeconomy with the focus on bioenergy. The outline of the presentation is to first give an overview of the bio-based economy shortly, then give examples of policy instruments, and then I will explain about EU policy instruments supporting bioenergy sector and the link to national and regional policy implementation. The next is policy examples, and then I end with conclusions and recommendations. The first, an overview of the bio-based economy. The bioeconomy system, central in that is the biomass delivery chain from biomass to end products. But this chain is of course supported by other instruments like the enabling environment, where you have transport infrastructure, research and development, regulations. Then you have the food environment, and you have the industrial environment. You have business services, and you have consumer characteristics, and they all together are influenced by policies these are of relevance for the bioeconomy chain. And then, of course, you have socioeconomic drivers which are influenced by bioeconomy activities, but bioeconomy activities are also influenced by the socioeconomic drivers. And this also applies to the environmental drivers, which influence how policies are targeted towards the biomass delivery chain, but also there is regulations influencing the influence of bioeconomy activities on environmental drivers. This is just to give you first flavor of examples of policies in the bioenergy chain. Basically, we can organize them according to regulations, economic instruments, and other soft instruments. Examples of regulations are, for example, the renewable energy mandates, co-heat and power mandates, fuel standards, grid connection requirements, obligations for renewable energy in buildings, green procurement rules, or emission legislation. It's all based on laws. Then you have economic instruments. They could be, for example, rural development support to on-farm bioenergy production, energy crop premia, feed-in tariffs, support for grid development, taxation, tax differentials for energy products according to renewable and CO2 advantages, user incentives, And then on the soft side, you have voluntary standards for under RED 1, Renewable Energy Directive 1 and 2, bioenergy action plans, roadmaps, circular economy action plans and roadmaps, which can be developed at national level and regional level, low ILUC certification, so they are not obligatory instruments. Now I move to the next item, and that is EU policy instruments supporting bioenergy sector and the link to national and regional policy implementation. The bioeconomy and circularity was introduced in EU policy already in the EU white paper in 1993. There was a need for knowledge-based investments, and the role of biotechnology for innovation and growth was acknowledged already in 1993. And this was further strengthened in the ambitions that were presented in the Lisbon Agenda in 2000. That they said that the EU needs to be a global leader in the knowledge-based economy to secure competitiveness and economic growth. And life sciences and biotechnology were seen as the most promising to reach these objectives. Then bioeconomy and circularity were introduced in EU policy. This went gradually. First it started with bioeconomy in the Bioeconomy Action Plan, in which the bioeconomy was really acknowledged as an official policy concept, and it was also defined as follows. So the bioeconomy is the production of renewable biological resources and their conversion into food, feed, bio-based products and bioenergy. It includes agriculture, forestry, fisheries, food, pulp and paper production, as well as parts of the chemical, biotechnological and energy industries. So the main actions in this bioeconomy action plan that were announced were investments in research, innovation and skills, reinforced policy interaction and stakeholder engagement, and enhancement of markets and competitiveness. The bioeconomy perspective was further widened in the 2013 7th Environmental Action Plan. But in that action plan also circularity was introduced in the main vision of the EU as follows. It was defined as follows. In 2050 we will live well within the planet's ecological limits. Our prosperity and healthy environment stem from an innovative circular economy where nothing is wasted and where natural resources are managed sustainably and biodiversity is protected, valued and restored in ways that enhance the society's resilience. Our low carbon growth has long been decoupled from resource use, setting the pace for a safe and sustainable global society. So here you see really that the concepts of circularity and bioeconomy are both seen as instruments to reach more sustainability. And then based on that, in 2015 the circular economy package was introduced, and that was the basis for the current Green Deal ambitions for the updated bioeconomy strategy and for this circular economy action plan. Now I explain about these most recent strategies. Well, the EU bioeconomy strategy, it's an instrument to increase the contribution of the EU to reaching the Paris Agreement commitments for greenhouse gas mitigation, and also commit to the Sustainable Development Goals. So sustainability and circularity are now integrated within the bioeconomy objectives. They are in the heart of the policy ambitions. And central is the need to reconcile the competition of different sectors for biomass. Measures were announced on three key priorities: strengthen and scale up bio-based sector, unlock investments and markets, deploy local bioeconomy rapidly across the whole of Europe, and understand the ecological boundaries of the bioeconomy. And what is very important is that the member states had to develop bioeconomy strategies. That was encouraged. It was not obligatory, but encouraged. And at regional level, it was stimulated to develop research and innovation strategies through smart specialization hubs. Well, the Green Deal. That's, of course, many people talk about it. It's very central to EU policy at this moment. It should be seen as a new growth strategy that aims to transform the EU in a fair and prosperous society with a modern, resource-efficient and competitive economy where there's no net emissions of greenhouse gas in 2050. Climate neutrality by 2050, and economic growth is decoupled from resource use. That circularity principle. But it's actually formulating more ambitious targets for EU climate mitigation activities. For example, in relation to climate, there will be a climate law that anchors in legislation climate neutrality by 2050. And this needs to be anchored in national legislation. That's the ambition, and that's announced that the EU is going to arrange for that. Then it has wide ambitions for decarbonization of the energy system, which is not a surprise, of course, because 75% of EU's greenhouse gas emissions relate to production and use of energy at this moment. And it is also announced that there will be a carbon pricing instrument introduced throughout the economy, and that will price carbon in the products produced and consumed in the EU, so also on products that are imported. So there will be an adjustment mechanism to reduce carbon leakage risk of imports. The Green Deal on energy, further explained. So there will be further adapted energy legislation that is expected in 2021, next year. I can still say that. There will be this climate law. I already explained about that, about climate neutrality in 2050. And there will also be a review of the national energy action plans that the countries had to submit under the Bioenergy Action Plan 2018. These plans were submitted in 2019, and they are now under critical review by the Commission to see whether the ambitions go far enough in these plans. And if not, the countries will be asked by the Commission to resubmit the plans with stronger emissions and more instruments to reach climate neutrality. And this can be done because they have to resubmit these plans every 2 years. The EU will also invest further in the different networks, trans-European networks. There's also an energy regulation network. It was already introduced in 2018, but under the Green Deal it is announced that this network will be further strengthened. So that network stimulates the cross-border cooperation to achieve the benefits of clean energy at affordable prices and deployment of innovative technologies and infrastructure that modernize and make the energy sector more renewable and efficient. And then there is also the ambition in the Green Deal to solve the issue of energy poverty for households in certain regions. And there are many people still in the EU that have no good access to energy. And this needs to be improved to reach a minimum standard of living. Then we have the EU Circular Economy Action Plan that was introduced at the beginning, presented at the beginning of this year, 2020. And it explains how a transition to further circularity is to be reached in the EU. Further circularity as an instrument to reach climate neutrality. The idea is that there should be more focus on resource use, resource extraction and processing, because this uses a lot of energy, and there are 50% of our greenhouse gas emissions are associated to resource extraction and processing. It also introduces legislation on non-legislative measures and targets areas where action at the EU level brings added value, mostly through existing sectorial policies. So it builds on existing sectorial policies. It also describes how the EU consumption footprint will be reduced, and the material use rate in the EU in the coming decades. And it wants also to boost economic growth through measures for products on design for consumers and public buyers. So basically, growth should be linked more strongly to circular and bioeconomy activities. In the Green Deal, in the circular economy strategy, you see that there is a link to existing sectorial policy. So I just want to take you back to what is the sectorial policy for climate and energy in the EU. Well, already in 1991, the EC committed to limit greenhouse gas emissions. So it took already measures to increase energy efficiency, and also ambitions to promote the renewable energy production. That was already a long time ago, actually, 30 years. In 2002, the first European climate change program was introduced, and policies were worked out to cut greenhouse gas emissions. And in 2003, an instrument was introduced, which is the Energy Tax Directive, which requires to set minimum rates for taxation of energy products in the EU member states, particularly, of course, the fossil energy is to be taxed, and this has to be done in a similar way in all countries of the EU. In 2005, the second European Climate Change Programme was presented, which had a focus on cost-effective options for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but also in synergy with creating economic growth and jobs. Working groups were introduced to set ambitions and instruments in different sectors. There were many working groups for energy-related sectors, sectors that produce energy and use a lot of energy and are responsible for large CO2 emissions. In 2003, this Energy Tax Directive was introduced, and I'll explain a bit more about what it means. It aims to reduce distortions caused by divergent national tax rates and to remove competitive distortions between mineral oils and other energy products. So the fossil and the renewable energy sectors, and create incentives for energy efficiency and emission reductions. So he widened the minimum tax rate to many products, so not only oil but also coke, coal, natural gas, electricity. Minimum rates for mineral oils were updated. Taxation of motor fuels, heating fuels, electricity. Minimum rates for energy products used in motor or heating fuels and also in commercial and industrial activities. In 2009, the Renewable Energy Directive was approved, and this introduced an overall policy for production and promotion of renewable energy. So that was really for renewable energy. It boosted the activities and it increased renewable energy production in the EU. The aim was for the EU to fulfill at least 20% of its total energy needs with renewables by 2020 and 20% improvement in energy efficiency. And for the member states, it really required action, which was the development of national renewable energy action plans, in which the member states had to specify how they would reach the 20% energy renewable energy ambitions, of which 10% should also be come from renewables in the transport fuel sector by 2020. And of course now it's now 2020 and we see that many countries have reached these targets and overreached these targets, but there are also several countries that did not reach these targets, among which the Netherlands, unfortunately. Then in 2018 an update of the Renewable Energy Directive was approved, the RED II. It announced advanced reduction greenhouse gas emission targets, reduction targets by 2030 for all member states, but with different levels of ambitions per country. The focus of the RED is only emission reduction in sectors not included in the EU emission trading system. Because these are covered by the EU emission trading system, such as transport, buildings, agriculture and waste. It also announced new binding renewable energy targets for the EU for 2030 of at least 40% from 1990 levels. So these were already, these targets, they were already recently updated again since the approvement of the RED II in 2018. So they have moved from 40 to minus 55%. Also, requirements for member states were introduced to put obligation on fuel suppliers, enabling the achievement of a 14% target for renewables, including a sub-target for advanced biofuels. And the RED II also aims to phase out biofuels with high ILUC risk and to promote biofuels with a low ILUC risk. As I already explained, that member states had to submit national energy and climate plans in 2019. And these plans, they need to explain through which measures member states will reach their emission reduction targets for 2030 and set as set in the effort sharing regulation, and to explain how member states foresee to reach their renewable energy targets and emission reduction levels. So that should be in these plans. Beside that, member states are also required to submit long-term strategies for climate and energy this for 2050. And currently, as I also explained, the EC is doing a critical review of these plans in the light of the Green Deal ambitions. Yeah, most of the other new elements in the RED II need to be transposed also in national law in the coming year. And that is also an action from the member states that is required. How does the emission trading system work? The emission trading system sets a cap on greenhouse gas emissions from large-scale facilities. So the large-scale emitting sectors, such as power and industry sectors and the aviation sector. And companies receive or buy emission allowances, which they can also trade. But the emission caps become smaller in time, so that the emissions are brought down in these sectors. It is entirely organized at EU level, so there's no requirements for member states to coordinate this. And in the Green Deal, adjustments have been announced in this trading system. For example, the caps will become reduced faster than originally was the plan, and it also will help to decarbonize and modernize energy-intensive sectors. There's currently high-level groups of energy-intensive industries that make recommendations about how these reductions in emissions can be reached, and there will also be additional finances from the EU Emission Trading System Innovation Fund, so the payments for these they are used, deployed to introduce large-scale innovation projects. Now I move to the next item on the in the presentation, which is good policy examples in the bioenergy field. We've chosen 5 good policy examples. The first one is the stimulation of sustainable energy production, which is a feed-in premium system in the Netherlands. The aim is to increase the renewable energy share in energy production and consumption. Then I explain about the Ordinance on the generation of electricity from biomass, which was recently introduced in Germany, which regulates which substances are classed as biomass and how the related tariffs are calculated when used in bioelectricity generation. Then there is the Act on the carbon dioxide tax for certain energy products in Denmark. The Act had its taxation system, and the example is put here because Denmark was really very early in introducing this scheme and evaluated very extensively. Then there's the regulation on the use of biomass from forest for energy. It's a regulation in the region of Andalusia, and the aim is to stimulate the sustainable production and harvesting of forest biomass for bioenergy production. And finally, we have the biomethane decree in Italy, also recently, which supports and stimulates biomethane injection, also electricity generation from biomethane, and also the use of biomethane in the transport sector. All these instruments are integrated with EU policy instruments, which I presented in the former slides. And so the red 1 and 2, effort sharing, regulation on the governance of energy union and climate action, and emission trading system. Why are these good examples? Well, in the case of the feed-in tariff system in the Netherlands, the STE system, the goal is to increase renewable energy generation at the lowest possible cost. It is also the first technology neutral subsidy system in Europe, and is open for renewable electricity, renewable gas, renewable heat, or a combination. Eligible technologies are biomass, but not only. It can also be geothermal, hydro, solar, photovoltaic, solar, so all renewable energy options. And it gives opportunity to develop a competitive renewable energy sector which focuses on real market aspects. It's cost efficient. It takes into account the sale of energy at time intervals of higher prices. And while at the same time it optimizes the expenditures of the government by supporting the most cost-effective solutions. That's then we have the Ordinance on the generation of electricity from biomass in Germany. Was introduced in 2018. It is positive already that biomass use in bioelectricity is regulated. Many countries in the EU have not done this yet. Germany is early doing this. If countries do not do that, then this makes their development more difficult and less sustainable. And that is regulated already in Germany, so they are advanced. It also helps to avoid conflicts between bioenergy generation and food security and biodiversity by classifying energy crops in a group of substances with lower tariffs, thereby stimulating the processing of non-food substances for bioenergy. So it is really a bit in advance of what is also regulated in the RED 2 and also being developed at EU level currently. Low ILUC, biomass, biofuels. And it is also a next step to more strict requirements of energy efficiency and higher feed-in premium support for bioelectricity and heat produced from sustainable biomass types, particularly those with no or low ILUC impacts. Then the Act on Carbon Dioxide Tax in Denmark. In the first place, the carbon taxation turned out to indeed deliver the objective of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and it did not hamper economic growth. This taxation system was already introduced, it started already 40 years ago. And so Denmark has a long history of taxation and also of evaluating the impact of that. It gave high benefits with relatively low carbon tax costs. It was also it gave a wide coverage of sectors ranging from natural gas, coal, electricity, light and heavy fuel oil. The policy was evaluated well and adjustments were made to the policy to integrate it with the new EU policy developments, such as the emission trading system and other market developments in and energy taxation systems. Carbon tax revenues were not used, were not for the government budget, but instead 40% of this tax revenues was used for environmental subsidies and 60% was returned to the industry that paid the taxes to introduce investments for emission reductions. And currently the Danish government also offers 25% reduction of the tax to the companies that sign an energy savings agreement with the ministry. So it keeps on encouraging companies to further increase energy savings and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So if the targets are reached, then more ambitions are stimulated to bring down emissions further. Then we have the example of the regulation in Andalusia on the use of biomass from forest for energy. Well, positive already is that forest biomass use is regulated. That is in that respect, Andalusia is an exception from many regions. So many countries in lower bioeconomy development stage have no such ordinance, which makes their development more difficult and probably less sustainable. It provides clear guidance on which forest biomass can be used for energy production, and this stimulates the use of forest biomass and also providing some guidance on the sustainable production of biomass in forests planted for bioenergy. And the regulation also targets forest maintenance to maintain fire breaks. So this instrument is therefore not only focused on enhancing this residual woody biomass supply for energy, but particularly also linking biomass provision with landscape fire risk reduction. And then the last example, which is the biomethane decree in Italy. It connects to the EU level goals and policies in the RED II, creating opportunities for economic sectors to step into biomethane market. The instrument helps the country to reach the EU level biofuel and environmental protection quota, and at the same time helps bio-based technologies to be more competitive and attractive on the market. The clear specification on what is to be considered biomass for advanced fuel generation also stimulates introduction of double counting fuels in the biomethane supply. And lastly, it stimulates the construction of new filling stations for different biomethane products, which is a key aspect in the spreading of biomethane based transportation. Because without these filling stations, the vehicle owners can't even think about that kind of transportation. So the infrastructure also needs to be developed. It's quite an integrated policy acting on a wide range of fields. I come to the conclusions. Now, first of all, we see that regions that are in early stage of bioeconomy development have mostly policy instruments that are often oriented towards renewable energy and energy production from biomass and recycled waste. But regions that come into a more medium to high maturity stage in the bioeconomy development have often surmounted the stage of renewable energy production and are focusing on bio-based products of higher value like bio-based chemicals, bio-based materials. The energy sector is clearly the sector that gains most of the support still, followed by agriculture, environment and the waste sector, and the research and innovation sector. And the three renewable energy policy examples in the Netherlands, Germany and Italy evolved in time. So they developed in time in line with the more ambitious EU-wide targets for greenhouse gas mitigation and renewable energy production. They show how regulation has shifted from overall-wide support to bioenergy production without putting very strict requirements on efficiency and type of biomass used, towards stricter requirements for energy efficiency, higher feed-in tariff, support for bioelectricity and heat produced from more sustainable biomass types, particularly those with no or low ILUC impacts. So thank you for your attention. If you're interested in more information about this policy field, you can also go to the Power for Bio website and download this deliverable 4.2. This was also the basis for this presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.